never be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
If you don't ask questions, you're never going to learn and you're not going to find your answers. But we're all in a position, even as a home inspector, I'm constantly learning new things. Like I came across a type of insulation I'd never seen before this week, and it looked like Cheetos in the attic. And it's a totally approved insulation. And after I looked it up, I was like, man, this stuff's actually pretty awesome. Why don't people use it more?
Hi, here I am today on Beyond the Listing. I'm Pam Flitton with One Remax Fine Properties, and I'm with Jonathan Hallmark, the owner of Hallmark Inspections, a residential inspection company that provides evaluation, reporting, and guidance for home buyers and their home inspections. Not only does he do home inspections for home buyers and sellers, he also provides CE classes for real estate agents to help them in their continuing education. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on to Beyond the Listing. I appreciate you being here. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pam, for having me on. I'm excited about it. So, like you said, my name is John. I'm a home inspector here in the Austin, Texas area. We do a lot of work up in Georgetown, Round Rock, heading south down into Dripping Springs. We're a small company. There's only two of us at this point in time, but we're always looking to add quality inspectors onto our team if anyone ever finds themselves interested in looking that direction. Both of us at this point in time have a background in education. I was a high school science teacher. My partner was a high school English teacher. And so we bring a lot of education into our inspections. One of the things that we always hear from clients is, man, that walkthrough was so thorough. I learned so much about this home and just about systems engine. And so that's something that we feel is of high value that we can bring to the table in our transactions.
Do most of your buyers, home buyers, come to the inspections?
I would say it's a fairly reasonable mix. We see most of the buyers coming if it is a resale inspection,
Uh-huh.
but usually if it's a new construction inspection, we don't actually have a lot of people who show up for that. Because
Sure.
most often in new construction inspections, they're just looking for a list that they can then take and hand off to the builder in order to provide them a punch list of items that they want fixed. They don't
Sure.
necessarily want to know and understand each of those pieces. They just want to have the list and say, please make this right for the
Yeah.
builder. Yeah, I would say most people are going to attend the inspection. And one piece that we always like to say, don't come at the beginning of the inspection, show up at the end. We make it a very conscious point to tell you, hey, this is going to be the end time of the inspection. This is when the inspector is going to be expecting you, because it's a little distracting whenever somebody's in the house wandering around while we're trying to work through and run our process.
What are
Uh,
you what are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah.
exactly. Hey, can you come take a look at this with me real quick? And then we're out of series and you've got to come back and get back into the rhythm of things and make sure you didn't forget something in the process. And then there's always the fear that they're going to go into the attic. I don't care how many times you tell them, please don't go into the attic. Somebody's going to go up in the attic anyway. And luckily at this point, I've only had one person fall through the attic, but it'll happen again. Even though you tell them not to get up there, it's just people drop through attics.
Oh, sure.
Uh, yeah. And it's kind of riding a motorcycle. They don't say if you're going to have a wreck, it's when you're going to have a wreck. Same
Yeah.
thing with addicts. It's not if you're going to fall through at some point in time. It's when you're going to fall through at some point in time. It happens to every inspector.
So you went from teaching high school to home inspection. How was that transition?
Whenever that time came around, my wife and I just had the discussion and we were like, we got to go into this full steam. And so I quit my teaching position or tendered my resignation so
Yeah.
that when summertime came around, I was ready to go full on into home inspecting. And once that safety net is no longer there, and you're committed to the jump, you do everything you can to make sure that you're going to land appropriately. And so at first I really missed education, but I found other ways, like our walkthroughs, like we said, are extremely informative. We like to educate home buyers on their home so that they feel very empowered as they make that decision going forward, as opposed to, we're just going to point out a bunch of questions to, which sometimes we have to, but for the most part, we want to try and educate all around that question so that they can understand some of the nuances that may exist in that scenario.
That's awesome. So tell me, what do inspectors, there's a point list that inspectors generally inspect. So what do inspectors generally see before anybody else?
Okay. So home inspections are regulated by TREC, the Texas Real Estate Commission, just like realtors are licensed
Yeah.
through TREC. And so they give us a rundown of what is the bare minimum standards of practice, which every inspector adheres to. Now, whenever we walk up to a house compared to a buyer, we're looking at extremely different things, because a buyer walks up to a house and looks at it and says, can I see myself living here? And a home inspector walks up to it and says, what problems do I see? And so we're looking at the same picture, but from two very different sides. It's like opposite sides of a coin. People are looking at a house asking, can I fall in love with this? And we're looking at it saying, what are the issues that we see? We jokingly say,
why I not fall in love with this?
yes, we jokingly say on our walkthroughs, our role is like that obnoxious relative when you bring a significant other home for the first time to a family reunion or something. We're going to look them over, ask them a bunch of awkward questions, and later we're going to pull you aside and tell you all the things that we found that were wrong about them. Like they suck their teeth, or they say every third word. And as a result, we're going to bring those things to the surface that you would discover if you kept going forward in that relationship. But we're going to let you know those here while it's still early, in case you need to get out of that situation.
Love that.
Yeah, as a home inspector, we're trying to come in and we're looking for the things that are oftentimes make or break in the relationship with that home. And there's a lot of stuff that we will see that your typical buyer and your typical real estate agent may not be seeing when they walk a home just for 20 minutes the first time when they're deciding to put in an offer.
So you're like Aunt Martha. I love that.
Yep. Or your creepy Uncle Charlie, one of the two.
Okay. Creepy Uncle Charlie for sure. So what are some of the trends buyers and sellers often miss?
I would say the piece that jumps out most to me are date of manufacture specific. So for instance, if you're showing homes in a neighborhood that was built in the 60s, you should have an understanding of the typical big picture deficiencies that would have occurred back in the 1960s. If the house was built in 1969, there's like a 70% chance that it's going to have aluminum wiring. And as a realtor or as a home buyer, you're probably not having those things front of mind. But as a home inspector, whenever I'm first getting a booking and I see the age of construction, my brain is already going through, all right, what are some of the big red flags that we're likely going to see in this home once we're in there? Make sure I've got those at the front of my brain so that I can evaluate the home through that lens. So things like aluminum wiring, asbestos siding, cast iron drain lines. Most people give no concern about what their drain lines are like, what they're made of, or where they go, as long as when they flush that toilet, everything goes away. But the second that process stops, then all of a sudden we might find ourselves in the middle of a $30,000 repair that if we don't do, the home's not livable any longer.
Sure. And that is so true because I've had many of those instances come about that an inspector has caught some of these things, right? Which being on both sides, I was actually pretty thankful because you never want to be on the receiving end of something when it's going to be extremely costly.
Absolutely. That's like whenever we discover a mold-like substance, home inspectors should not be declaring something as mold unless they are separately certified for that. But we come across mold-like growths all the time. And that's one of those pieces that most of the time the seller didn't know that was there. Because if they knew it was there, they would have fixed it. They don't want to live in a home that has that. And so whenever we come across that, I always feel bad for the sellers just because it's like a kick in the pants or a punch in the gut. It just takes the wind out of your sails and you're like, oh my gosh, oh no, now what type situation. And so it's never fun no matter which side of the transaction.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some maintenance realities that people should be doing to their homes? Because I walk into homes all the time that people don't take care of. And there are small little things that people can be doing to take care of things. Like my husband has a list of things that he's got on a list. Every 3 months he changes out the filters, and once a year he goes around and he caulks things and things like that. There's some small little things that people can be doing. So what do you find are some small maintenance things that people don't take care of that are so easily taken care of, but they don't?
And those that jumps out in my mind first off is smoke alarms. Smoke alarms have a 10-year life expectancy, and carbon monoxide alarms have a 7-year life expectancy. And so I walk into these like 25-year-old houses that still have the original smoke alarms in there. And people are thinking, hey, we're probably protected, but you're really rolling a dice, because when was the last time anyone went through their house and actually pushed and tested the smoke alarms to make sure that they were working? I believe smoke alarm companies say that they should be tested weekly. I'm pretty content if people test them monthly, but I don't remember the last time I tested them here in my house. And so it's one of those things that we all forget to do. I do get around and I do it every Christmas season, just because you bring the tree in, I change all the batteries, I test all the smoke alarms, but I don't test it monthly like I should be. And that's one that is so simple, so easy. Anyone could do it and it could save your life, but life gets busy and we forget about it and it doesn't get taken care of. Another thing that you already mentioned, changing out your AC filters. That's a great one. People run with dirty AC filters. It decreases the productivity of the unit. It decreases the longevity of the unit. It can lead to some costly issues. You might have to replace a blower motor prior to whenever you would have replaced it previously. And so, yeah, that's one that can save you money in the long run just by keeping up with that. And interestingly enough, I've talked to a couple of HVAC technicians and they're like, don't buy the really high-end, super high HEPA filters. You're better off getting the low to moderate range filter systems, because they're going to filter out the air just as well without putting the extra strain on the system itself. The only reason you should be using those really high-end ones is if you have extreme problems with respiratory. You've got somebody who's got like allergy-induced asthma, or had a history of mold in there. You've got somebody who is allergic to a dog, but you still have a dog in the house and you're trying to get that pet dander molecules out of the air. Otherwise, those low to mid-range filters are going to be a much better suit for your system for its longevity.
And if you're,
Another piece that,
yeah, I was going to say, if you're changing them out anyways, those medium range ones should be good enough anyways, correct?
correct. It's just if you're trying to pull out allergens, that's when you need something that has a much finer mesh.
Sure.
But that fine mesh means that your air conditioner is now breathing through a mask. And it's not able to function as well as if it had a more open mesh that it's able to breathe through.
Sure. Gotcha. Okay.
Another piece on air conditioners, we get lots of calls into the office asking about what to do on this, is making sure that your drain lines on your air conditioner are being flushed on a yearly basis. Because your AC, whenever it's running in air conditioning mode, it's subtracting moisture out of the air, and that moisture condenses down in the unit and then runs through a drain line, either under a sink or to the exterior of the home usually. And those lines over time will build up with bacteria and potentially fungi inside of that, and will create basically, for lack of a better term, and making sure that we're flushing that and draining that out periodically so that always is flowing freely can save you some pretty costly backups and repairs.
Okay. So taking care of having your air conditioner serviced, I would say probably yearly would be a great idea.
We recommend at least once a year. Same thing with water heaters. Whether it's a tank or a tankless unit, having that serviced and decalcified or flushed once a year, an excellent practice to do.
Okay. Maintaining your systems is always a good idea.
Yeah.
Small issues that become big problems.
Yeah. With smaller, absolutely. And that's why regular maintenance helps catch those things when they are small, but become big.
Yeah.
The other thing that I encourage people is be observant, look around. We walk through our house 100 times a day, but you never walk through it with the intention of looking at your house. You're walking through your house going somewhere with 3 other things on your mind. I encourage people once or twice a year, get yourself a beverage, whether it's like an adult recreational beverage or just a sparkling water or something, and just wander around your house and look your house. Look at the windows, look at the walls, look at the ceiling, look at the floor, look at the edges where things come together. Look under your sinks. Look around your house, look on the outside, look at the roof. Check and make sure the gutters aren't clogged up. Just wandering around your house and looking at your house specifically, most people are going to catch 90% of the issues as they arise that way. Because you're going to see something and you're going to think that doesn't look right. And you're going to then put it on a list and call a handyman or contact somebody to come out and address that. But if you never see it and something that's a little bit off now, but then is allowed to be deferred for a while, can become a much larger problem.
Sure. I had a client of mine that got hit on an inspection for a mold issue in 2 spots. And it cost quite a bit of money to get it taken care of, for it to come out that there was no issues. And it just happened to be that her daughter took a shower before the inspector came over, so there was water molecules in the air when they inspected it. So the water molecules hit, showing that there was mold, right? The weirdest.
How did they identify that it was mold in that situation? Were they using like a thermal camera or?
Yes, mold. And then there was a wet sponge underneath the sink. So between the wet sponge, but there was just a small, I don't know, something within the pipe. It wasn't all the way. So it was coming down, it was leaking into the sponge. Well, it just hit the sponge. So the sponge was growing mold. So there was nothing else other than the sponge. So between the 2 things, I got hit with the mold, and it was a little bit, but they had said that there was mold in the wall, and that was the only thing that they could think of. But it was a costly little learning lesson that we had.
For everyone.
Yeah, so
in that situation.
It was quite interesting. So now, no, never take a shower right before an inspector comes. And to make sure that tighten your pipes and there are no sponges underneath the sink. So the little things that you learn when you're in this business and you can talk about and throw out. So some advice for first-time home buyers, what to prioritize and what not to panic about.
I would say the single most biggest piece of advice for first-time home buyers is don't be scared to educate yourself.
Sure.
We have amazing resources at our fingertips at this point in time. If somebody's throwing out terminology that you don't understand, you've got Gemini and ChatGPT sitting right there to give you a PhD level explanation of whatever it is. And so recognizing that you do not have to be ignorant as you move forward in the process, that you can inform yourself anywhere as you move forward, should hopefully empower you to get out there and get a little bit outside of your comfort zone and then get educated to be more in your comfort zone. So that's one of the things I've seen so many home buyers who are coming into the market for the first time and they don't know what they don't know. And that scares them. And I think that there needs to be a little less of that's going on, because there are so many opportunities to get educated and to begin to know what you don't know. as you move through the process. So with that said, knowing that there's a ton of information out there, if you want to learn how to do stuff yourself, there's a ton of YouTube videos out there. You've got ChatGPT, you've got Gemini. There's lots of great ways that you can get information. I would say the biggest thing that I would recommend for first-time home buyers going forward as they're looking at homes is to remember that this does not need to be your forever home, but it's probably great to think that you can see yourself in this home for a longer period of time as opposed to a shorter period of time.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a number of first-time home buyers who bought 3 years ago at the height of the market, but now need to move out of that home because they bought for what they could and what they wanted right there, but they can't because they're upside down in their payments and they're going to lose money in the transaction at this point. So I really think I've seen too many first-time home buyers who are like, I just want to buy a home. I'm tired of paying rent.
Yep.
I think you need to be a little less myopic than that and a little bit more forward thinking of, hey, I'm buying a home and I could be in this home for the next 15 years. As opposed to, I'm going to buy this home for the next 2 years. Because in that 2 years, you didn't gain any equity. You just paid interest.
Sure.
That doesn't start to kick in until you get down. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know if I would say that's the biggest piece of advice I would give to first-time homeowners other than educate yourself. I think that's the bigger piece that I think is useful for them moving forward.
No, I think that's great advice. Absolutely. Every home that I've ever lived in, I go in with the thought of, I'm going to live here for a bit and I want my money to count and I want to make sure that I have enough money for my next house. So I think that's excellent advice.
I think the other thing that I would say to first-time home buyers is be diligent and save.
Mhm.
Oftentimes first-time home buyers are getting into older houses that are going to have maintenance issues come up down the road, but they're not planning and thinking about that. When you move in, you've got a 7-year-old air conditioner. Great. You've probably got maybe 8 more years of service out of that AC before you've got a $15,000 to $20,000 bill coming your direction. So let's go ahead and let's start budgeting for that. Set up an account, put it in a high yield savings account so that you're not losing on inflation, and just put away a little bit of money every month. It doesn't need to be much. If you're putting away $50 every month, which most of us can do, that's $600 a year. Over the course of 10 years, that's $6,000. You took a lot of the bite out of a new air conditioner whenever that cost comes up. If you can do, instead of $50, $100, now you're pretty much paying for it without it affecting your day-to-day budget because you were going ahead and budgeting for it ahead of time. So that's one of those pieces that I make that piece of advice pretty regularly whenever I see systems that are going to need replacement in the future that's fairly obvious that's coming. It's, hey, start budgeting for this now. Put off that trip. Don't buy that pair of shoes. Start rolling that money and get into the habit of putting it into an account so that when big repairs come, you've already got that money to be able to jump in there and it doesn't take the wind out of your sails.
I think that's a great idea and a great way to tell them how to do it too, because I don't think many people will give that advice when they're talking about these things. I had a mentor years ago that we went to a seminar and they taught us that you need to have a 1 year, 5 year, and 10-year plan. So start thinking about what you need to save for a year, what you need to save for your 5 year, and what you need to save for your 10-year. And then that way, if you start budgeting for all three, then you won't be blindsided by any of them.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great concept that you're giving them. I guess that kind of talks about it. Construction knowledge in real estate. So that's great communication. That kind of hits on the next thing I was going to talk to you about was better communication with your clients, right? Whether it be your buyers, sellers, and or real estate agents, because we are definitely your clients as well, since we do for them. So you got to have a huge amount of communication with your real estate agents as well.
Absolutely. I feel that's one of the areas that real estate agents have the opportunity to distinguish themselves
Mm.
from other agents in the market is just y'all's level of education and communication whenever it comes to homes specifically. Most agents are great at the paperwork and dealing with title and dealing with the loans and knowing what the interest rates are right now and determining what the value is in the market and all of those pieces. But I see so many agents fumble whenever we're in the walkthrough. Granted, this is the part that I look at. I imagine there are times when they're fumbling those other areas too. But I see so many agents fumble whenever we're sitting there in the walkthrough and I'm talking about a system, whatever system that may be, like, oh, we're going to need to replace this water heater. And you can see them start to sweat already, where they're like, oh, I don't even know how much that cost. How hard is that? Who do we even call for it? And I'm like, calm down. It's maybe $1,500 or $2,500, and we're going to call a plumber. This isn't burn the house down, big kinds of problems. But that's one of those things. If you don't know, if you haven't had that home experience, you've never dealt with a water heater needing to be replaced, you don't understand how big of a deal it is or how small of a deal it is. Just in the same way, if you're an agent and you've never come across cast iron drain lines under a house and watched how that can balloon out of control once you get a plumber in there talking about tunneling underneath a slab foundation, you don't know what you don't know. And so in terms of construction and construction systems and housing systems, I think that's one of those areas there. Being educated as a real estate agent so you can then be the informed advocate for your client is an excellent way for you to distinguish yourself within the field. And even more so, to provide added value for your clients.
Being an educator and communicating yourself, I understand that you give CE courses or continuing education courses.
Yeah.
What kind of courses do you provide?
If back, I realized I still had this strong desire to teach and to do more in kind of like the classroom setting, as opposed to simply doing it whenever we're in a walkthrough.
Mhm.
And so I got licensed as a CE provider and started building a series of courseworks. And so we've got a handful of courses. One is just a general course on red flags, things that a realtor should see whenever they walk into a house, like cracks in the walls, things that would indicate failing foundations, understanding some of the timelines of when we were using certain materials in the construction process so that, oh, this house is from the mid 70s. Chances aren't great that it's got cast iron, but it's still a possibility. Oh, this is in the middle of the 60s. We're definitely going to see cast iron drain lines if they haven't replaced them. So we're going to need to order a sewer inspection on this. And so just basically educating them on some of the big pieces, giving ideas on how difficult those may be to navigate with your client and negotiations with the seller. So we've got that red flags class. We have a class on foundations. We have a class on drain pipes and the drain lines underneath a house. We have a class on the difference between hydrostatic testing and sewer cameras, because that's a huge area where people are like, I don't know, what are those things? And so we have a whole class around that so that you can then be highly informed about the difference between the two and know when to suggest which one to your client in the different scenarios that exist. We've got a class on HVAC systems. We've got an upcoming class that I think will be our next one coming out on roofs. I think I'm forgetting one or two in there, but we've got a bunch of good quality coursework, and the places where we present usually are really excited anytime we have a new class coming out. Like, put us on the schedule. We'd like to have you come back out and do your new class.
That's awesome. How long are normally the classes? An hour or 2 hours?
Everything we do is a 1 hour class. We're busy. Y'all
Yeah.
are busy.
Yeah.
We don't want to block out half a day, but we want to be able to give you high amount of information in a short amount of time so that you can then take that and move on and be educated. We also do one on septic systems. 30% of homes have septic systems. And most realtors, if you've never lived in a home with a septic system, know almost nothing about them. And they're one of the most expensive systems in a home. An
Oh,
AC, easy to replace, not nearly as costly as having to put in a new septic system.
so then I'm going to assume that you work with septics.
I personally have my license as a National Association wastewater technician. And so we do septic inspections, but we're really choosy about which ones we'll look at.
Okay.
Simply because if you're asking us to look at a system that's 30 years old and hasn't been pumped in the last 15 years, we're going to decline that because chances are there's going to be major issues with that system. And you're probably talking about major repairs or replacement at that point. And we don't want our clients to have to pay twice. So we usually just say, hey, stop right there. Don't use an inspector for this. You need to hire a septic specialist so that you can get bids at the same time,
Right.
repair and replacement. If your option period's 7 days and we're coming in on day 3 and say, hey, you need to get this reevaluated by a septic guy, now we're down to like day 6 before they're out there to be able to do it. And you're waiting for their estimate at that point in time. And your ability to negotiate has been crippled. And so we want to make sure that we're providing the best for our clients, even if that means we're leaving money on the table. We would rather sleep well than to be wealthy.
Sure. But you've got names and the knowledge of where to go and where to send them. For sure.
Yeah, we have a few preferred providers that we've worked with over the years that we think treat our clients well and provide them with reasonable service. And when people are like, who should I call? We'll usually give them 3 names of people that we know, let them know what level of care they might be getting with them so that they can hopefully get a quality inspection in there for the septic system.
I love that. I love when people are, honest about what they do. They'd rather just do good than do. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's fabulous. You'll stay in business a long time. So people will always tell. What's one misconception you wish everyone in real estate understood? Give me some common myths.
I wish everyone understood what a hydrostatic test was.
I do not. I do and I do not.
So let me ask you this. When I say hydrostatic test, what are the things that kind of start alarming in your brain?
Okay, so I think I don't know, honestly.
Okay.
Because it's not something that I have done quite a bit, and it's beginning to be a big thing now.
I won't say we're hearing of it more. I would say that we're starting to hear kind of language around it change just a little bit. And I'm trying to help push that language change as much as I can.
Yes.
When we're talking about the drain lines under a house, and when we say the drain lines under the house, we mean when you flush the toilet, where that water goes, that's into the drain line under the house, headed out towards the city sewer.
Okay.
And those belong to you basically from the street up through the yard underneath the house. Mm-hmm. And so those convey with the home and they are the homeowner's responsibility. When an inspection is done, whenever we're looking at a real estate transaction or the purchase of a home, one of the questions is, what do those drain lines look like? And this is especially apropos whenever we're looking at homes that are built prior to about 1972.
Okay.
In the early 70s is whenever we started to see PVC come into play in the drain lines. But prior to that, we were looking at materials like cast iron, clay, concrete, Orangeburg, which is really not fun. And then a couple of other things that are less common.
They start disintegrating.
And depending on which one of those are, they each have their different issues. Some of them are very brittle and can break and the connections are loose and you get lots of root intrusion. Mm-hmm. Some of them corrode and rust away and then will begin to disintegrate. Some of them don't hold up well whenever exposed to water over time and will delaminate and collapse. And so there's a number of issues that go along with them. So in the past, the most common thing to do was to perform a hydrostatic test. And so let's go back and let's talk in the 80s and 90s. That was the most common test to test the drain line. And plumbers would come in, and what a hydrostatic test is can break that word into two pieces. You've got hydro for water, static for stasis, like just staying level. And in a hydrostatic test, a plumber will go in and they'll go downstream of the house, down close to where the city connection is, and they slip basically a balloon into the drain line, and then they inflate it. And that balloon then blocks off the drains coming out of the house. And then we go back into the house and we remove a fixture, usually a toilet, and then they fill water into that drain line until the water comes up to about the level of the floor where they can then see it and observe it. And then they stop. And they wait. And they wait and see whether or not that water stays static and remains at the same place, or whether they see that level just start to slowly decrease over time and drop down.
Okay.
And so if we see that level decrease and drop down, but we go back over and we check our balloon and our float and it's not draining out through the drain line, then what we've demonstrated is somewhere between our float and where we had that water level, we have a leak in our drain pipes.
Okay.
That's especially important when we're talking about foundation, because foundations are driven by moisture, and the damage that occurs is driven by moisture. Now, in the 80s and 90s, when this was the only thing that was available, sellers would say, they broke my plumbing. My plumbing was fine before they did their stupid hydrostatic test. And people thought that they were pressurizing the drain lines and that hydrostatic tests were breaking and rupturing drain lines. But again, all we're doing is we're just putting water in those drain lines. We're not putting any pressure. We're just letting gravity be there.
Sure.
And if a leak exists, then that would show that we had a leak in that location, somewhere in between those two locations. So the misconception that I would like to clear up, hydrostatic tests do not break drain lines. They show presence of leaks that were there before the test was performed.
Sure.
Now, one of the pieces behind this, why this continues to exist as a myth, is because if you do a hydrostatic test, you have to get the seller's permission. You cannot have a plumber come in and perform a hydrostatic test on a house without the seller signing off on a hydrostatic test waiver, correct?
Correct.
And people always thought that the reason that existed was because hydrostatic tests could damage the drain line. But the actual reason that waiver exists is because when plumbers take off toilets, sometimes things get damaged. Toilet slips and falls, it breaks a tile. The seller doesn't want to be liable for that. They want to make sure that somebody else is going to repair any damage that's created by removing that toilet and reinstalling that toilet.
Sure.
And so this is a misconception that I see and hear all the time.
Okay.
Now, fast forward, as of about 3 years ago, they changed plumbing code. Plumbers are still the only ones who can provide a hydrostatic test, but they changed the code to where home inspectors can now do sewer camera inspections. And so a lot of inspectors are starting to carry drain cameras that they can then insert through the drain lines and look at the lines themselves.
Okay.
Which can tell you what types of materials we're looking at and what the conditions of those materials are. And then they can look for other obvious deficiencies like low spots, breaks and cracks, and root intrusions. But they cannot tell you, unless it's visibly obvious, whether that drainage system leaks. That can only be done with a hydrostatic test.
So is there any particular age and home that you would suggest that being done in, or all homes?
Let me say it this way, because I don't want it to come out that we're trying to just sell a service that's not needed. I have seen issues in new construction homes, and I have seen old homes with great drain lines.
Sure.
It can be in any of them, but if we see a home that's prior to 1974, we're almost always going to recommend a sewer camera inspection to go along with. Even when they say all new drain lines. because what a homeowner remembers paying for to a plumber and what actually happened underneath the house, very rarely do those meet eye to eye. I did one on a home 2 weeks ago where they said, the sellers are telling us that the drain lines are all good. And this was a house from the 1960s, that they've replaced all the cast iron underneath. And I said, tell you what, I'll do the sewer camera for free. And if it's all PVC, you don't have to pay for it. But if I find that it's not, then you'll have to pay for it. And they were like, done, let's do it.
Let's do
So of course, and we find that they did actually replace everything from the clean out at the front of the house, underneath the house, but everything under the driveway headed out to the street was still cast iron and in not great shape. And so the seller, they weren't trying to lie. They remembered that they replaced everything, but it was everything that needed to be replaced at that point in time, not every pipe that was that was there at the house. And so it's a service that we have found more and more value behind as time goes on, because the more we look, the more things we find and discover.
Sure. What's the general cost of that?
When we do it, we charge $150 for that service. It's somewhere between $2 and $4 to have a plumber come out and do it.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And so we discount the price a little bit since we're not licensed plumbers. But at the same time, whenever we do that, it increases our liability. And so we have to make sure that we're buffering that appropriately. And the equipment's really expensive. Those cameras, they're a few $1,000s for the camera. And I've broken two at this point.
Yeah.
You get into a line and there's rodent preventer that was stuck up, but as soon as the camera bumps it, it comes down, and now your $2,000 camera is jammed in there and you can't get it back out without just saying, here we go. And so in order to make up for those occasional incidentals, we have to have the cost kind of set where it is.
Sure. Peace of mind. That's
Absolutely.
It's like insurance. That's why you got to have it.
And that's one of the things we tell them. For you to sleep tonight knowing that your drain lines looked okay, is $150 worth that? Never have to worry, to not have to question it again. And most people are like, yeah, that sounds
In my former life, I was an insurance agent. I like being well protected. So for
Absolutely.
me, it's okay. Other people may not, but to each his own. So anyways, so what are some of the most interesting things you've encountered as a home inspector? Your most memorable moments?
There's two that jump out to mind.
Lessons learned.
There's two things that jump out in my brain about being memorable. One was the time I walked into a garage and they had a stuffed raccoon, and I didn't realize it was a stuffed raccoon, and it was like tucked between some boxes. As I was getting ready to step over those boxes, I looked down and I think that there is a raccoon sitting right there, and I jumped back a little bit with it and then had a good chuckle at myself afterwards. That was one that was pretty memorable. The other time was when somebody was shipping drugs to a vacant house. And I showed up at the same time that the Amazon delivery person showed up. And so I was like, oh, yeah, I'll just move these packages inside the house for safekeeping. Obviously, the sellers will be back by and will pick up their packages that they misdelivered. I opened a big old can of worms whenever I did that. And it was interesting, to say the least.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that would... do people do that? I guess they do.
They do.
You know, all sorts of things happen all the time, right? Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
And someone was like, your lesson learned should be you shouldn't move things from the porch inside. I was like, no, I'm still going to do it because it's the kind thing to do. And I'll just cross my fingers that I'm never in a situation where people are delivering drugs to a house again.
I do it all the time. I do what I do. I move them inside, and then I call the agent and tell them I moved it inside. There you go. So any preparation tips that the homeowners should be doing before an inspection?
Absolutely. Everybody always says, make sure all your light bulbs work. Nobody wants to have the comment that says, oh, the front porch light, we don't know if it works or not. It might be a bad bulb, or it might be a bad wiring, or it could be all of these other things. If all of your lights just have fresh bulbs in them and they all work when the inspector comes, you can eliminate a lot of trauma for the potential buyers. That's one. Change out your filters. Make sure your AC has a good filter. And please move everything away that prevents access to somewhere.
Yeah.
If we can't get into the water heater, if we can't get to the electrical cabinet, we can't get in the attic, that just creates big question marks for the buyer that kind of gnaw at their brain and won't go away. And so if we can get access to all of those places, the inspection is going to go so much smoother and the process is going to go so much smoother for you being able to sell your home. So access, change your light bulbs, change your filters. All of those are low-hanging fruit. Pretty much every seller should be able to accomplish.
You would think it would be the easiest things ever. So tell me, as we're coming to an end, is there anything that you would like to tell us that I haven't asked you about?
What do you think?
I think we've gotten into some things here.
We have. I think it's been a great conversation. I think there's a lot of good, useful bits out there for buyers, for sellers, and for agents that came through that. I guess the one thing that I would say for everyone, buyers, sellers, and agents, never be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
If you don't ask questions, you're never going to learn and you're not going to find your answers. But we're all in a position, even as a home inspector, I'm constantly learning new things. Like I came across a type of insulation I'd never seen before this week. And it looked like Cheetos in the attic. And it's a totally approved insulation. And after I looked it up, I was like, man, this stuff's actually pretty awesome. Why don't people use it more? But don't be afraid to ask questions and don't be afraid to seek answers. You can learn a lot about your home. You can learn a lot of things to take care of your home if you're just willing to take those steps that way. And you can have a better home, a home that the systems function more appropriately and cost you less money if you're willing to do those pieces. And as an agent, you're going to be a better advocate and more informed to support your clients if you do those things as well. So never miss up a chance or miss an opportunity to learn something new.
I totally agree with you there. There's no question that's a dumb question or a wrong question. Just ask. I do it all the time. I've learned a lot here today. And as you've seen, I had no idea what hydrostatic testing was. So that for me, that was a good thing. And I'm glad I asked. For sure.
Yeah, hopefully now you can move forward as a more informed advocate for your clients.
I will. I love the ideal of it. The more protected they are, the better I feel about it. The more protected they are, the more protected I am, is the way I feel. Yeah.
That's part of our philosophy too. The more educated they are, protected we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's all about, is protection for everybody, I think. So if they were to hunt you down, where would they look for you at?
We're pretty easy to find. Our website is just hallmarkinspections.com. You can find us on the web. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. On our social media platforms, we do a lot of like hot tips. Hey, if you just had roofing done, go up in your attic and look for this to make sure your vents are connected still. We see that one all the time. And there are lots of things that we throw out there. Like we'll be posting some content later today on reminding people to winterize their homes and cover their hose bibs and make sure that their exposed pipings are wrapped. As here in the Austin area, we're getting ready to have a hard freeze like we haven't seen in a few years.
Yep.
And so just reminding people on things like that. So social media is a great place to find us, and on the internet with our website.
This city's about to be shut down. So you can find that in
Pretty
on
much.
your website. And do you have a YouTube channel or anything like that?
Haven't gotten into YouTube yet. That may be something that we do in the future, but as a marketing piece, that hasn't been something that has driven our content at this point in time. We find that longer form tends to be too highly embraced out there. At one point in time, we were really close to doing what we were going to call homeschooled, which would have been a YouTube-based home information for first-time buyers. And so it's just like teaching about every system, all the major systems within the home in about a 10-minute segment, where it was more kind of a interview style with a realtor. But then things got busy and
I love
didn't
that.
quite get it done. And hoping that it'll come back around in the next off season.
I love that. Give me a call when you do that. So we're going to find John at Hallmark Inspections. That's his website, Hallmark Inspections, and give them a call. You should have all their digits and their email address as well. And you can set up an inspection with him, or you can look at one of his mini classes or his helpful hints.
Yep.
So there you go.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for talking with me today. And give him a call, and I appreciate it so much. Love to have you back someday, and we can talk some more stuff about inspections.
Absolutely. That'd be fun.
There's always more happening beyond the listing. Stick around and catch the next episode for real talk and insights that help you move smarter and farther in real estate.